Sci-Spi.tv proudly presents an introductory series to Cosmic Gaia with Laura Eisenhower, coming this fall. Enjoy. I am so delighted to have Laura Eisenhower as our guest on Sci-Spi.tv today. Laura is a global alchemist, a researcher, and an intuitive astrologer. Of course, she is the great-granddaughter of Dwight David Eisenhower and releases exopolitical information that has long been held in secrecy. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
Laura and I have run into each other at several conferences, and it's just so exciting to finally have this opportunity to meet in person and to do this interview. So thank you very much for your time today, Laura.
Oh, absolutely. It's good to be here.
There's a few topics I'd like to dive into for our interview today, from global alchemy, astrology, DNA, and the chakras, as well as solar alignments and where we're at. We're right here in June of 2019, so we can keep our eye on, what's happening in the here and now. But can you give us a little bit of background about how you got interested in this intuitive astrology?
Yeah, well, it just sort of came along. I just learned how to do a chart. My sister actually sent me two natal charts of my children after they were born. And I had already, kind of had an interest just based on, I've always been fascinated by it. But then I got real curious because I'm like, oh, I want to learn about this because of my children. And it kind of like took off from there. And that was in 1998. I already had enough of a base in it, like a basis in it, but I wasn't actually like doing readings. Once I learned their chart, then I was all over it. And then I learned how to do charts, and I started to just, do it for friends and, just sort of like test the validity of it based on like people that I knew well, just to see like, let's see, does this feel accurate? It wasn't that I really questioned it that much, but I was just playing around with it for a while. And then through word of mouth, people just started coming to me like, I want a reading. But I was a landscaper at the time. I'm like, okay, I have to kind of manage my time, and it began to take over. And then I just had somebody help me create a website, and I just started to put it out there. And then I took it into a whole nother dimension as far as, things that I share in my presentations about how it relates to the larger picture and Ascension, this window that we're in, and also medical astrology. So it's one of the kind of things that never ends. It's like a lifelong study. There's so much to it. It's like you're a permanent student when you begin with astrology, for sure.
You're incredibly well versed on how astrology relates to the human body, the chakras, the energy centers, DNA. Can you share with us how these solar alignments, these planetary alignments affect our chakras and, as such, our DNA?
Absolutely. So the first component that sort of represents what I guess compromised our DNA to the point where we've been functioning from, just a few strands compared to the 12-strand diamond sun embodiment that we used to have, that links into the 13, 14, and 15, which is like, the founder flames, which is also seen as like the Trinity, if somebody were to put it in a more, different context. And so when we symbolically went into the tree of knowledge and we went into that duality, it really showed up in the, astro charts as how our personal maps show how we relate to the concept of duality. So something called the North and South Node, which is representative of the larger soul journey and the larger picture, shows that we're born with an energy signature on the South Node, which gives us information about maybe the last 5 or so lifetimes, but just like a theme we were born in with, maybe things that we didn't complete in a past life, it'll show patternings about, or things that we are able to complete that we're bringing in with us. Like we see, maybe like a 4-year-old pick up the piano and be able to play it. Like it was just like last lifetime, it was probably performing or practicing. There's things we bring in that are both challenges that we need to address and also things that we want to, keep going with. And then sometimes we clean the slate and we start fresh with a whole new set of abilities that we want to develop. But the whole deal is that we move into the North Node, which is directly opposite. So it sort of proves how we're here to integrate polarity and move beyond duality, because the symbology of the South and North Node is like the Ouroboros, the serpent biting its tail, and it forms kind of this circle where we move in a direction, but it's not linear because it loops back, and it becomes this spiral that helps to begin to activate almost like that dragon energy, which is part of the Earth grids, that corrects all the reversals that also show up in the astro chart with the Saturn moon matrix and how we've been relating to the planet Saturn. So when I look at people's charts, I go, almost immediately directly to Saturn. Like, how are they relating to Saturn? Saturn has a lot of great attributes. The highest octaves of Saturn are like teacher, master, but the lower octaves is being, under somebody's control, control agenda type controls that we might get from the school systems or our parents who have picked up on that program. Any societal programming, any blockage, any insecurity, anything that really, really limits us and puts kind of a lid on our DNA potential that becomes a block is very much that Saturn moon matrix that relates to the dark cube that's actually in the planetary body of Saturn, because it used to be like a sun, it turned dark, it turned to like the lead of this human experience. So when we look at the alchemy, we're really turning the lead of Saturn into gold again by going through the trials and tribulations of Saturn. So when we look at these different transits, particularly with Pluto next to Saturn right now, Pluto's very alchemical. Pluto's all about death, rebirth, alchemy, and transformation. Saturn's very, lead-based, very much about the law of structure. So if we allow ourselves to jump into this transmutation, transformational energy and alchemical energy of Pluto, we each are tasked with enlightening Saturn so it's no longer the controller, but something that becomes a new container for the new human that's able to bring in the divine energy and lift the lid to begin to activate our dormant strands, but still work with the law of structure, where the law of structure is actually turning from carbon-based to crystalline. It's no longer under the domain of the control agendas that want to actually digress us and keep us as a food source. So a lot of the other planets that are helping with the DNA activations are the outer planets like Uranus. I always say Uranus because there's too many jokes with the other way of saying it. Neptune and Pluto, right? So we've got what's going on in our own personal charts. And when I look at people's chart, I always see what's your relationship with Saturn and what's your relationship with the outer planets, because these are key as far as the larger picture goes. The rest are sort of the personal aspects of us. And then I look at, well, how does it relate to Saturn and these outer planets, like our sun sign, our Mercury, our Venus, our Mars. And then Jupiter and Saturn tend to be sort of not like the outer planets, but they make, Jupiter's really expansive. It can think beyond the Saturn energy, and Saturn's very limiting, but sometimes they work together. Sometimes Saturn, a person comes in very evolved already and beyond that matrix, even though they carry a strong Saturn. So I know that's getting a little wordy, but looking at the transits with the outer planets, Uranus is the planet of shock and upheaval that leads to great awakening. So it's the planet of sovereignty. It's a truth frequency. It takes us into the 0 point. But when we experience it on a human level, it kicks us to the ground. It creates a lot of crisis, anything from like injury to, the shocks that come out of nowhere, maybe like a loss of a relationship or a job, something that really jolts us. Sometimes it jolts us into trauma. Sometimes it jolts us into like a great epiphany and awakening. So when it jolts us into trauma, it means that we're having a very difficult time bringing in the rays of Uranus. And so we might be creating experiences that are challenging us to overcome it and override maybe these darker elements that are shocking us like awake, maybe in a very uncomfortable way. It doesn't mean it's okay either, right? So there's that justice piece. But anyway, so through the shocks and upheavals, whether they cause trauma or great epiphanies, we have to realize that breakdowns and breakthroughs are sort of like two sides of a different coin. And we have to keep moving through the trauma, whatever it is, to allow an awakening, or else we keep cycling in that, maybe looping in that kind of pattern where, we're just going to be blindsided by, something very, dark. So the lower entities are actually waking us up, if we can see it as such. The dark forces can be great catalysts. But of course, in the human realm, we want to create justice. We don't want to just, look at it like it's all astrology and it's okay that satanic ritual abuse is happening and all these crimes against humanity are happening. So there's another calling that comes along with that. And everybody's tasked with a different role. So not to go on for too long, but then Pluto is death, rebirth, alchemy, transformation. So the transiting Pluto is going to help us to have those events that throw us into the underworld. But then we got to look at, well, what's our natal Pluto? What's our progressed Pluto look like? How are we handling that initiation? So we have what's happening in the transits, what's happening as far as where the planets are in the sky right now, but how it hits us personally is where we can really see where we're resisting these initiations, where we're resisting our DNA activations, where we're misunderstanding these events as being something that's maybe detrimental or something that we fear to the point where we give our power away back to the Saturn matrix where we're maybe medicated for it because we think we're going crazy, right? So it's a way to understand these initiations and be able to ride them without getting caught in the web of these power structures that like to take advantage of our vulnerability. So the whole idea is that we can work with the initiations, break the Saturn matrix, become the masters and utilize Saturn and allow these initiations to awaken our dormant strands, activate our galactic chakras, and become whole again. And so each person has a unique map as far as how they handle what's happening in the cosmos right now. And everybody's storyline is a little bit different, but in a way, we're all going towards the same goal. And we can all help each other. So we very much attract people into our lives that might hold a piece of medicine that our chart might need, that might, be a challenge, that we might, end up getting stuck in. We might meet somebody who doesn't have that issue. And then we share codes, we share, different, levels. And that's why unity consciousness is so important. It's much more than just, let's just be loving and be community. We're actually giving each other pieces of ourselves to rebuild the architecture of our DNA and our soul matrix, personality matrix, monad, and universal mind.
I heard in a recent interview that you were talking about that the rings of Saturn might actually be dissolving.
And that would make sense because of Pluto. Pluto is very much about, alchemy. So if we're turning lead into gold, the rings have a lot to do with the broadcasting sort of system that connects with the moon. And 90% of our DNA, not for everybody, is very much controlled. So when we look at junk DNA, that's actually receiving these transmissions of artificial information and programs that generate this false reality that we're enabling because we haven't switched on these other levels. But we're not enabling it so much by choice. We're very vulnerable. We're kind of born into it. We've had our DNA tinkered with, hybridization and manipulation of our incarnate consciousness, and the stepping down of dimensional levels due to galactic wars and exploded planets and landing in this lower harmonic universe really put that Saturn lid on and created this net, which put this duality upon us to really learn and grow from. The beauty of this window period is that the sun in 2010 started to move through the 13th sign of Theicus, and it's the only zodiac sign ruled by the ether. And if we look at the pentagram, it's earth, air, fire, water, but the fifth element is ether. But the Satanists have symbolically had it going into the ground where, and even they've manipulated the coding of the dodecahedron platonic solid, which represents the ether. And they've done everything in their power to separate us from being able to flow with the ether energy, all the way to, targeting the feminine and the goddess energy, which, the consciousness of this planet, Gaia, who holds the quintessence, the fifth element. And so when the sun started to move through Ophiuchus in 2010, that's actually when the mother energy was able to come back into the planet and activate it as a diamond sun, which is shifting the earth grids, correcting the reversals. And so the whole AI transhumanism thing is to completely distract us away from what's happening on an earthly and cosmic level. So if we can put that to the side and recognize what's actually happening, we don't really need to overly strategize, how are we going to step into the ascension energy? It's more like, what can we shield ourselves from? What can we divorce ourselves from? What cords can we cut so that we're not being fed on anymore, so that we can align with what's actually happening, which is giving us exactly what we need to switch on everything, because the mother has returned. It's been in dark reversals, like the whole Baphomet thing, the whole worshiping of the Baphomet has a lot to do with how religion and power structures and politics and media, negative false news media has used this propaganda to steal our life force and actually feed off planet beings and entities and, all these different demonic forces to, use us as a battery and to power up negative technologies to generate an artificial timeline that we would be steered down during this particular window period. So when we hear about Armageddon, apocalyptic stuff, I know apocalypse also means great awakening, but when we, look at how much doom and gloom we're being fed about this particular window period, like the end of the world or alien invasion or Christ returning, we're being fed all this stuff, but we're never really told that this is an inner shift. This is an initiation into the fullness of who we truly are. That's the last thing that we're being told. And that's probably, to me, the most important thing that we can connect with right now, that this is an inward initiation and we are the ascension energies blossoming and coming to life in a way that is more natural than we can imagine, but we're so not used to it that it feels incredibly foreign. So we have to get comfortable with what we've been robbed of for thousands of years, and recognize that, we don't want to rush into it too much, but slowly but surely we can, hold hands together and walk to our natural habitat again.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our introductory series to Cosmic Gaia with Laura Eisenhower on Sci-Spi.tv. Sci-Spi, merging science and spirituality.